Why do you believe you should be the Premier?
It's about purpose. It's about knowing why you're there. In fact, I had a string of losses before I won. Hard work and determination and tenacity, and I got that from my parents. It's a great privilege to serve in here. It takes a lot to get elected to this place. When you're in this house, you do feel the weight of the responsibility of the office you hold, and I'm always alive to the fact that we represent the welfare and future and possibility of our state. Never stop learning. The day you think you don't have to is the day you're in trouble.
I'm Elina Reddy and welcome to Foreign Influence. Qualities in the business person. Yes, it's within us. It was ashamed of to something
like music where I'll tell a story.
What's happening? Your life can be better.
Happiness is about having a good time, it's about joy.
We all go along a faith, so.
And the challenge is... Hey, I'm Elina Reddy and welcome to Foreign Influence. Today we're at the Parliament House. We're going to chat to John Pesutto, the opposition leader of the Victorian Liberal Party.
Good.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Prego.
You are so busy and you found the time for us.
It's all
that's
pretend.
Amazing.
It's all pretend. Yeah, it's all pretend. We just pretend we're busy. No, it's a delight to be here. So.
Oh, thank you. John, why do you believe you should be the Premier?
Because our state needs to be rebuilt. It's seriously weathering the stresses of financial mismanagement from the Allen Labor government that's been in office for 10 years and it will have been in office by the next election by November 26 for 12 years. We're seeing our health system falling apart under the stresses of mismanagement. We're seeing our roads riddled with potholes, schools don't have teachers, projects are blowing out, and the result of those blowouts is that Victorians are suffering. Whether they pay through the highest taxes in the country or the highest debt in the country. Our state is really feeling the pain of that mismanagement. So I'm putting myself forward to be the next Premier so that with my team, I can lead Victoria out of the dark days under the Allen Labor government and create a state once again that is first in the nation for attracting business and jobs, the best education system, one where we actually have teachers, a health system that's functioning, roads that are actually safe for drivers. We've actually got a situation now where our roads are not car worthy.
You're talking about the roads. I drive on Beach Road pretty much every day and I can actually pinpoint the pit holes that my wheel is going to fall into that I have to avoid.
Hawthorn, the seat of Hawthorn, which is one of the closest seats to the CBD, along Burwood Road, there are 2 potholes near the Hawthorn Arts Centre that are massive. And they just get patched up temporarily, but then you're back to the pothole after a few weeks or months. It's not good enough, and it's a sign of just how strained the roads budget is now, because as I said, everything's going into certain things. We have to manage our finances well enough so that we can invest all around the state. Now, one of the problems with the current government, and I feel very strongly about, is that the government is putting all of our eggs in one basket. It's saying we've got this massive suburban rail loop that nobody really asked for, and it's going to involve over $200 billion. At least, that's before we have blowouts. That's going to mean we don't have money for the schools and hospitals that our state desperately needs, or the roads that we need, the child protection services, the justice system we need, all because we're putting all of our eggs in one basket. So my case to the Victorian people is that I understand these problems. I'll have the priorities that will get our debt down, our taxes down, so we can attract jobs and investment, that we'll start investing all across the state, not just in pet areas where Jacinta Allen wants to invest. All areas need to be invested in, but not at the expense of other parts of the state. I can provide that leadership.
If you were the Premier, how would you fix a Victorian economy?
Well, we'd have to start with debt. The debt that Premier Jacinta Allen has overseen is approaching $200 billion. By 2028, we'll have a debt probably in excess of $200 billion. That imposes enormous financial burdens on Victorian households and businesses. That's not fair and it's not right. So we've got to get debt under control. Now, I've already announced a suite of policies that will enable us to stop the blowouts on major projects. We're seeing around $40 billion or more of blowouts on major projects. We have to stop that. We have to be able to build infrastructure. Absolutely, our state is growing. We need to be able to invest in hospitals and roads and schools. All of those important things and major infrastructure in terms of public transport. But we need to do it in a way where we're investing across the state. Now, at the moment, all of these blowouts are on a small number of projects that Victorians are paying for. Once we get that debt under control, Elina, we can then start lowering taxes. And that will take some time, but we have to lower taxes. The damage under Premier Jacinta Allen is so severe, it will take some time. But if we want to attract jobs for Victorians and investment on which those jobs are based, then we have to say to businesses around the country and around the world, invest in Victoria. We have a very attractive tax regime, and the costs of doing business here are being lowered so that you bring your businesses to Victoria, because ultimately it's about employing Victorians. Once we start doing that, that will generate the growth, and our state will be able to afford once again, like it used to be able to before this Labor government, to invest in the whole state. That's what we desperately need to do. The Allen Labor government has been telling Victorians now for a number of years, oh, you can have it all. You can have it all. We can invest in this massive suburban rail loop, and we can invest in everything you need to. And that's just not true. It's not. You can't invest what will be at least $200 billion, and it will certainly be more, but no one knows, it's so big. You can't invest that much money in one project and then, with a straight face, say to people, oh, we can still invest in hospitals. I mean, you would have seen recently the debate we've had over hospital funding, and the government tried to impose these savage cuts on health services. And you know what that would have resulted in? And it probably still will result in, because we don't know whether the money's actually going to flow, result to cuts to paediatric services, cancer screening, special care cots for youngies, pathology services, amongst others, will all be slashed just because this debt's out of control.
John, please tell us about this room.
Well, this is the lower house. It's like the equivalent of the House of Representatives in Canberra. So this is where all of the lower house members sit. There are 88 members. So we sit on this side as the opposition. The government's over here. My seat's just there, the third one there, and the Premier's is the third one there. So I hope to swap seats
yes,
at
that's
the upcoming election.
You're pretty close.
Yeah, not far. Just a few more metres
Yes.
and I'm there. But look, what happens in here is obviously of supreme importance to the people. This is where we debate legislation, we debate important motions and matters of state. We get to ask questions and prosecute issues that we feel strongly about. And equally, the government of the day can spruik what they're doing as well. But it's a very important chamber. It's one of two, and then you've got the public galleries at the back and the top there. It's a great privilege to serve in here. It takes a lot to get elected to this place, and all members, no matter what their party, generally work very hard to get here. And so they are passionate. We often get criticised for the energy that you see explode in question time.
Conversations get very heated when I watch on television.
They do, and it does get spirited in here. But in defence of everybody who serves in here, the reason that happens is that people actually are quite passionate about the issues. And so when you're passionate about something and you hear somebody, whichever side, saying something that you vehemently disagree with, you get worked up. You're human. And it happens to everyone. Everyone gets worked up. Some people might be better at overseeing their responses better than others, but I don't think there's anybody who's ever served in here who has not been moved to some kind of reaction or important place where they feel strongly about an issue.
John, what are the three things you love about politics?
So I would say, in order of these priorities, speaking to school kids, going to school and talking to them about why politics and what happens in Parliament is important is always a joy, because even with primary school students, you find they actually do get a lot of the concepts and themes. Second one I love doing as a politician or a member of parliament I should say, is going to citizenship ceremonies. I find them very moving because my parents, I still remember as a very young child, would have been 5, I can't remember how old I was, 6 or 7, my parents becoming citizens. That was a big deal for them.
It was a big deal for me when I became, and that plan that you
What year did you become a citizen?
In mid-90s,
Okay.
in 1994.
Yeah, and the joy on people's... So
Yes.
that's a great joy. And I think I would add as the third thing, serving in this place. I mean, there's nothing like being out in the community, but being in here is special as well. And despite the debate and the spirited nature of the exchanges that occur in here, I'm always alive to the fact that we represent the welfare and future and possibility of our state. And I think that would be something that's shared by other members as well.
What's the one message you would like for the voters to hear?
Change is possible, and don't lose hope in our state. Change is what I represent and my colleagues. We want to restore the standard of living in Victoria. We want to restore good government to Victoria. I'll tell you, at the end of the day, Elina, the reason why so many of these problems are now being felt by Victorians is because we've got poor government. There's corruption, and that's not only me saying that. We've had the Auditor General, the Ombudsman, the Anti-Corruption Commission have all pointed to wrongdoing inside the Allen Labor government. There's a centralisation of power in the Premier's office. So we don't hear from experts anymore. What happens is the Premier and her close knit of advisors decide, oh, we'll invest in a major piece of railway of $200 billion. They don't involve everybody. They don't consult. The same thing happened with the Commonwealth Games. You might remember that was a centralised decision.
A lot of very sad and disappointed people.
Exactly, particularly the athletes and regional communities who've been screwed by this betrayal. What happened in that case was Premier Allen decided we should have a regional Commonwealth Games, did no due diligence, did not do any of the work to determine is this a responsible decision and commitment to make. Didn't do any of that, they just centralised power.
John, what would set your government apart from the current one?
Yeah, it's one, our priorities, and two, the style of leadership and decision making. First of all, priorities. We would focus on the things that are most important to people. Cost of living. This government doesn't care about cost of living. The government, I argue, and my colleagues, operates on the basis it's not our money. They don't realise it's the taxpayers' money and it belongs to households and businesses and the community. They're spending money on behalf of the Victorian people. Our priority will be get the basics right. Don't worry about putting on a hard hat and a high-vis vest so you can do a media conference. Worry about, do we have a decent tax regime that encourages jobs and investment? Do we have hospitals that actually work? Do we have schools that actually have teachers in them and classrooms that are fit for purpose? We don't. Do we have roads that are safe to drive on? Now, all of those priorities have been ignored by this government. My government, the Pesutto government, will focus on getting the basics right. Secondly, the style of government. You need government to base its decisions on a whole range of advice. I'm a big believer in what we call the Westminster system of government, which this parliament, this beautiful parliament, represents. It's the idea that the government of the day makes the decisions, but that it has a public service that is encouraged and free to offer frank and fearless advice. So you get all sides of an issue before you commit on behalf of the Victorian people. And style, in terms of consultation, involving people in decision making, produces better outcomes.
Let's switch gears a little bit. I see how passionate you are about what you do. When and how did you develop the love for politics?
So I would have to go back to when I was about 15 or 16-ish years of age, and I just had a real interest. Would you believe I was actually very interested in chemistry and physics? When I was just looking into this and reading about it as a young kid, like a lot of things, you start to encounter the politics of issues. So all of a sudden, reading at my leisure about atomic energy and nuclear energy, and eventually evolved into an inquiry into what's the difference between authoritarian government under the Soviet Union, as it was then in the mid-80s and mid to late 80s, and democratic government in Australia and the United Kingdom and the United States in particular. So I started an interest in the systems of government that actually was spawned by that interest in nuclear energy and the debate around that. So from there, I just started reading about history and government, and then I remember a local politician coming to my school. Again, I would have been year 9 or year 10, and I'd just been absolutely fascinated with what he did And then I think a couple of years later we went to Canberra and it was all downhill from there, and I was totally hooked after that. But I developed that. So I went to university, Melbourne University, and I graduated and then began my journey immediately. So I ran for my first race.
Yeah. And you did law? You studied
law? Commerce at Melbourne University, because I always wanted to be involved in public service in one form or another. So I graduated in law commerce at Melbourne and then went back to my hometown, and then within a year I had my first go at running for office, and I lost. In fact, I had a string of losses before I won.
But you gave it a go.
Oh yeah. I think there were 4 goes before I won on my 5th go. But from the age of 15 or 16, I'd had this love and passion for government and public policy, and I've always been involved in it ever since.
This room looks like an upgrade. Velvet seats, like first class on the airplane. Tell us why. Is it red as well?
That's right. This is the upper house of the Victorian Parliament. It's called the Legislative Council. They really did spare no expense here. You can see the relief work, and the architecture is a lot more ornate than in the other house, because that was seen as the house which represented the common people, whereas this house, going back through our British heritage in terms of parliamentary history, represented the House of Lords, the equivalent of the House of Lords. So they saw this as a more regal chamber, a chamber initially that was seen as superior to what would eventually become the lower house of the Parliament. So they spent more on it, but it is a very important part of our Parliament. So 2 houses, the lower house we were in before and then this one. This is important because the government of the day tends not to control this house. So whilst the government will obviously control traffic in the lower house, we are entirely thankful that we've got a Parliament that has a house like this which can operate as a check on the government of the day. So it doesn't always get its legislation through. Whilst there is, a very long history to this house and how it relates to the other one, it has a very important current role in being a house of review.
I feel very important just to be standing here.
And it does, it makes you feel that way when you're actually serving. I don't serve in this house, obviously, I serve in the other house, but when you're in this house, you do feel the weight of the responsibility of the office you hold. And part of that is, you can see through the imposing columns and the beautiful architecture, it inspires that sense of service to the public. And whether you're a servant in here as a Member of Parliament or a civilian, when you come in, you do feel the weight of that in this room.
What made you decide to choose Liberal Party instead of any other political parties?
So my parents came here from Italy in the 60s, and I'm one of 5 kids. Dad worked as a sparky, an electrician on the power stations, and Mum worked as a machinist in a shoe factory in Traralgon. And so they worked really hard. And
as immigrants do.
Yeah, it's a classic migrant story, which is, they're very inspirational stories. And really it's from them that I developed this passion for the idea that where you can, do your best, work hard, and you live in a country where that kind of effort and initiative can be rewarded. And so you don't rely on others to do it for you if you can. Thankfully, we live in a compassionate society where we do our best to look after those in need. We can always do better, but we do have that as part of our approach to government and a self-respect for us as a noble and civilised country. But there's also this ethic about hard work and determination and tenacity, and I got that from my parents, and it just drew me to the Liberal Party, which for me is about the power of an enterprising culture, the security that comes with the rule of law, and the importance of community and family. For me, an enterprising culture isn't just about business. I'm not just talking about starting a business. It's being involved in your community and being enterprising, having initiative, having a vision and wanting to execute on that vision. Now that might be a commercial pursuit, or it might be something in the community sector or in the arts or sport, whatever it is. You apply your mind, you work hard, you do your bit to advance that effort.
Politics can be a very stressful career choice. People are always watching and they're constantly judging. How do you deal with that? And also, how does your family deal with that?
Yeah, it's about purpose, I think, is what I would say. It's about knowing why you're there. And yes, you can, if you want to, bury yourself in what can sometimes be the gutter of social media and the kinds of discussions you see at the periphery, which involve, fairly malicious commentary and the like. I pay no regard to that. It's irrelevant to me now. And I can say that with the benefit of experience, that there's no upside or dividend to doing that. All it does is distract you from why you're there. I will always listen to advice, but I don't listen to invective. I don't listen to vitriol. I don't listen to malice. I listen to reason. I listen to considered commentary. People who have thoughtful insights. Even if I don't agree with them, I will listen to them. I
Something
like to
constructive.
learn. Absolutely. Yeah. And in this profession of public service, one of the most important things someone said to me many years ago was never stop learning. So even in this position, where I'm vying to become the next Premier of our great state, I'm very conscious that I, like everyone else, can learn something every day. And you do that. You're always trying to improve what you're doing. And that never stops. The day you think you don't have to is the day you're in trouble.
That probably inquisitive mind comes from your love of physics earlier on.
I can't say I was the best physics student, but it did lead me here.
So just thinking about your life, like how do you relax from all this politics, from your very stressful job at times?
Yeah, look, politics is very demanding, but if I didn't love it, I wouldn't do it. But I do things. I mean, obviously with my family, Betty and I have 3 daughters, so that takes up a lot of time. But as a personal pursuit, I do some reading, not as much as I used to. I find relaxation in my growing collection of guitars. So I'm collecting those and learning as much as I can in the time that I have available. I find that very relaxing. It goes along with my singing in the car when I'm on my own.
That's a good hobby to have.
I actually do enjoy singing, but not in public. I don't think I can do it in public, but I do enjoy singing. It's very cathartic.
John, what can you share with us that no one else knows?
No one else knows. I think it's a light-hearted one, but I don't think people would know that I am just a huge, huge fan of Whitney Houston.
Okay.
I'm not sure people would have expected that.
Because you like singing, so do you sing along to her songs in the car?
Yeah, I can't keep up with her.
Dance with somebody.
Arguably the greatest voice ever, or one of the greatest voices ever, but that would be something not many people would know about me.
You describe yourself as being from the Greek side of Italy.
Yes, the Greek part of Italy. Yeah, so I've said that at a number of functions because my wife Betty is Greek, has a Greek background. So when I go to Greek functions,
they're full on.
Oh, yes. No, they're very, very organised.
Very rich in culture.
And they have every right to be proud of what they've achieved in Melbourne in particular, being one of the greatest Greek diasporas. But I often say, because my parents came from Calabria, which, as you know, was very much a Greek part of it, that region for centuries. So I often just joke that I come from the Greek part of Italy. Between us, Betty and I, Greek background, Italian background, so our kids have the best of both worlds. But all Australian at the end of the day. We love and cherish our ethnic heritage.
What cultural traditions did you follow growing up with your parents versus to your cultural traditions in your own family that you have created?
Yeah, look, things have changed, and to some extent there's a sad sense of nostalgia with some of these considerations. When I think back to my childhood, the time we spent on Sunday lunch was always a big thing. Everything stopped for the Sunday lunch and the siesta after the lunch. So that's going back to when we were little kids. And the second thing that I miss very much, but it's now, I think, reflective of most, certainly Italian Australian families, is the tomato sauce. So making the tomato sauce when you had the big drums, and you would boil, you sterilise the bottles, you'd make the sauce, you'd put the sauce in the bottles, and then you'd have, probably several dozen or more bottles of beautiful gold-like tomato sauce bottles that you'd use as passata for your pasta.
Or pizza base. Yeah.
That was a whole weekend's worth of tradition just there.
With your family now, like with your children, what do you do, guys?
There's the big games, what we call the big games, so the family events that we all come together with, the big church events that we'll go to. I can't say we go every week, but we do those. So Greek Easter and Christmas and the like, we do those things. And look, an occasional dinner out with the girls, and they've got boyfriends now, so there's more joining the flock. The demands of my role are such that it's not easy to do the same thing every week or every fortnight or even every month. It's just hard. And what I can say is Betty and the kids do understand that it is a commitment that we've given, Betty and I in particular, to the Victorian people, that will provide that opposition. So it is I mentioned Betty as well because it is a partnership. You can't just go into these things alone.